Third Period Podcast. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Nate Livie. I'm a senior at Merrimack High School.
I'm DiPirro. I'm also a senior at Merrimack High School.
And this is Chris Frank. I'm also a senior at Merrimack High School.
It's your boy Blaise Notter over here, kicking it as a senior. I want to get out of here. Please help me.
And here's our guest, Sophie Kim.
Hi.
All right, so as many podcasts before us have started, we were just having a conversation. At the end of it, someone said, hey, we should start a podcast. So here we are. I think worst case scenario, it'll just be us talking and, having fun for our own benefit. And, best case, we get like 10 listeners. So
I don't know. I think this is going to go viral if you ask me. So what do you guys want to talk about today?
All right. So for today, we are gonna go for a very, for a very general topic: existence, consciousness, meaning of life, etc.
Yeah, very basic.
See where this goes. Starting with a, very simplistic topic for our first podcast.
And we're not in any way qualified to talk about any of this stuff, but it's fun to talk about, so why not? We also don't have the best recording devices, and hopefully that will improve as we go forward.
If you want to
sponsor
sponsor us,
hit us up. Sponsor us on Patreon. That doesn't exist. No,
and before we start, our advertiser, Blue Apron. So I guess to start off,
should we pick up just from the conversation we had yesterday?
Yeah, so before we would
fill them in on it.
Basically talking about how just kind of our belief system and how that impacts what we think and how we operate, and just kind of general broad topics of what is this, etc. So for today, I think we should just go around and just talk about just kind of our background and I guess philosophy and religion and stuff like that, and kind of where we are now. So do you want to start, Mark?
All right, sure. Where to start? Well, how do we all get here so that we're all deciding to sit in a room, make a podcast? How do we get here in the first place? You're just born into the world. It's kind of a weird topic to think about.
Well, that would mean that everything that's ever happened had some way and somehow contributed to this moment happening.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
It perfectly happened so that this scenario would occur. For all I know, I could have been sick today, and this wouldn't be happening right now.
Oh, we would have just replaced you.
Yeah, exactly. It might have been. Sophie might be talking in my place right now if it wasn't. But
so would you say that was a predetermined event then, by that same logic? Because,
I think it's possible. But, okay. Have you guys ever heard about, you all know what deja vu is, right?
Yes, sir.
So
in The Matrix is when they change something to, stop the humans from doing whatever.
No, okay. But you see, this moment in time, and you're like, whoa, I've already seen this before, even though you haven't. Okay, so I've had these, weird dreams where I see, something in the dream, but I actually can remember it, and then, a month later, it actually happens.
Yeah.
And, exactly as I saw it in the dream. Now, I don't know if that's just my brain putting together the pieces of, it's kind of similar to what I saw in the dream, so now that must be what happened in real life, or the other way around.
Well, off of that, there are basically two competing theories about what deja vu is. There's one theory that basically says that it's kind of the human consciousness and the human brain transcending the fourth dimension, and being able to actually interpret some of what is in the future, based on what we see in our subconscious state with dreams. There's also another theory that basically just says it's our brain fucking up, which I think is much more likely.
Now, what exactly is the fourth dimension?
That just means time. So we're linear creatures. We experience our entire lives, in linear progression with in this temporal plane in which we exist, and we can't break out of that. And that's kind of the whole thing with time travel, is trying to break out of that. But even then, you're still progressing through linear time. So, what some people think God is, or whatever entity created us, if something did, they think it's some kind of creature from the fourth dimension. that isn't bound by the restrictions of time and is able to see all of existence, all of matter in every state it has been, in every state it will be, and is in kind of a superposition. And we aren't able to comprehend that physically. We just don't have the capabilities with our limited, mind.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, all the things that we can imagine, but we can't process, ourselves,
Yeah.
And I think that's also another cool thing about the whole, like, fourth dimension. There's this creature that can move through time that we can't, but, like, and that's what people think was, like, a god.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you hear all these stories about, like, ancient aliens or whatever, and it's like, maybe it wasn't, like, a god. Maybe it was just some other creature that's from a far more advanced society that just came down to check, like, what is this new place?
I think with the search for extraterrestrial life, we kind of have a very simplistic view of what it is and what it can be, of life in general. We think that it's going to be some, green men and flying saucers, when I think our entire notion of what life is pretty limited. It could be, spore-based. It could be part of a larger intelligence. It could be a hive mind type of thing.
No, but we've talked about this before, like, with the whole hive mind thing and the, like,
mushrooms
being like, like, imagine a mushroom being able to physically move using its, like,
the spore-based kind of thing.
Yeah.
And mushrooms exhibit intelligence on a cellular level, which is basically unheard of. The experiment that was done was they put different nutrients points in a map of Tokyo at the major subway stations, and they with the major one being like the center, and they placed the mushroom spore in the center, and it started to grow. And at the beginning, it began to search out just to search around the general area, and once it started to pick up the different nutrients points, then it would spread more and more until it engulfed the entire thing. And then after like a few days, it actually began to restructure where it would get the power from, and it created the direct energy transport type of thing. And it actually structured the Japanese subway system in a way that was more efficient than what we did.
That's amazing.
And it is able to remember what doesn't work with that and everything. And it's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, and because that's life working in a way that we don't really comprehend, because we think, we got to have a brain to do something like that. But no, I mean,
it's exhibiting an intelligence.
Now, connecting back to one of your previous points, what does everybody here think of the possibility of extraterrestrial life?
I think it's very possible. I think it's not going to be maybe what we expect, or maybe the first extraterrestrial life that we see is definitely not going to be an advanced society. Most likely, it's probably going to be something unicellular. But I think it must exist. There's no way that this phenomenon could have only happened once, I think.
Yeah. Right. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I feel like a lot of times when people talk about aliens, they sort of say, like, oh, you believe in aliens, as if it's somehow like an outlandish idea, or like we have this idea of them as being like green people with flying saucers, but I feel like it just seems so unlikely that we're the only living creatures in the entire universe, and we sort of have that narrow, very like Earth-centric view.
Yeah.
But I just can't really imagine that we're the only life that emerged from in the entire universe. So
yeah, I mean, it's possible that there's only like one perfect scenario where this happens, like every galaxy per se, and that, I mean, none of them have progressed far enough. Because if you think that the start of the universe happened at the same time for everything, what about if every civilization in different galaxies was progressing at about the same rate? Maybe different kinds of life forms, but similar idea, and that none of them can exhibit space travel to its full extent yet. Yeah. And so there's all these different life forms in different galaxies, but no way of interacting yet, just because we're too primitive.
And off of that, we've only actually been searching for, the past, like, a few decades, really, in the span of the entire universe. That's such a sliver of time. And, we're, basically since, like, the 40s, we've been sending out all these radio waves in every direction of space that are just kind of residual from what we receive on Earth. And at the same time, we've been listening for other signals. And since we have no signals, we're like, oh, there's nothing out there. But it's such a limited window, and we only had the technology since 100 years ago. It's not like, and other alien civilizations might be communicating with something far more advanced than we ever have. And it's also interesting to think about like what the lifespan of a civilization is. It could only be a few thousand years, and we missed the window, or it could be that the life is far more advanced, that the biggest struggle isn't finding it, but it's recognizing what the alien life actually is. And it could be something far more fantastical than we could possibly ever imagine. It could be disguising itself as alien life so as not to alarm us as to what it really is.
Yeah. That's a good point. Blaise, anything? Kind of quiet.
Aliens.
Yeah, that is the topic we're talking about. But yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Like, I think that, extraterrestrial light, it's also possible that, time is completely different to them. Like, maybe they each, imagine an alien that its lifespan is 1 Earth year.
Yeah.
But to them, that's like an eternity. Like, their time frames are so much different than ours that they live in different ways, and almost like a hive mind.
Yeah.
Really short-lived, but they all work together really well. And there's no, the central intelligence, I guess, would be like the queen ant or whatever.
Collective consciousness type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no way that we can currently understand that, because we don't even understand how the hive mind works on Earth.
Yeah, with ants and like shrimp and everything.
Yeah.
There's actually many species of shrimp that operate with the same complexity as like beehives and stuff. And
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's like they're able to communicate just using chemical signals, and they're able to work together and create very complex structures that wouldn't be possible. Evolution kind of directed in that path because they work together, as a collective group. I think it kind of speaks for the human condition in a way, saying that if we, focus on our collective subconscious and learn to communicate with nature and have like a bond with it in which both of us benefit, then I think everyone would be improved in society.
Now, you actually brought up earlier how there's this whole notion that if there is extraterrestrial life, it's probably just going to be like green men or something. And Hollywood's kind of forced that upon us.
Yeah.
But honestly, it might be comforting to know that there is life outside of this planet, because we are such a small speck in this universe. Knowing that we're not truly alone, I think that would actually be kind of positive in a way.
Yeah. In either circumstance, I think it's a relatively positive outcome. Either we aren't alone in the universe, and there's this entire world of other species and diversity, or it's that we're selectively alone and that we're special on a cosmic scale. But I think it's kind of egocentric to think that.
If anything, we might just be a product of pure chance.
But if it's a product of pure chance, there's no way that this chance only happened once.
I think that.
I think that would be a really rare outcome.
Yeah.
And even like I was reading about how even like the emergence of single cellular life, it can only occur at a specific period in Earth's development, and any period of time before that or after that, it wouldn't have been right for it. So it's like they're like the primal soup with all the lightning and all the chemicals and the low oxygen environment kind of created that, and then the bacteria changed the atmosphere and created an environment in which life could evolve on the land, and then eventually develop tools and cook food with fire and and create podcasts in a high school music room.
Yeah, when you put it that way, and you fill in all the steps in between, it's like, how did it all happen so perfectly?
Yeah.
You look back and it's like, wow, everything that needed to happen did happen for it to be the way it is now.
Obviously, this is pure speculation, but what would you say are the factors necessary for life? Like, is it because we have a sun nearby? Does it help that we have a moon, because that's so crucial to like the tides and such?
Oh yeah,
there are actually like this entire very long list of specific factors that if they changed by a little bit, then life would never have been possible on the planet. I don't think that speaks to God or anything. That kind of just is chance. If if the factors weren't there, then life wouldn't be there, and we wouldn't be asking like, why are the factors there? You know.
Well, I mean, we say that in relation to what life as we know it is.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I was
perhaps,
also thinking that.
Yeah,
but perhaps
yeah.
it would just have been a completely different life form. We wouldn't be sitting here making a podcast, but.
Yeah.
But maybe some other type of
Yeah.
alien form would be recording some.
non-carbon based or
We're
something.
thinking of this as the ideal end goal, and like
Yeah.
somehow all these things perfectly happen, so that like this like amazing solution would be
Yeah.
here. But
This isn't the peak of
but,
all of all of
but
evolution.
who knows if other things had happened, like life could have turned out a different way. That's not necessarily worse, but just like not the same.
Yeah.
as how we think of
Like
it.
maybe
yeah.
not
Yeah, this is-
oxygen breathing and yeah.
Yeah.
To think that this is the peak of all evolution and human progress is kind of
This
sad.
podcast right here.
Okay, technical difficulties.
Yeah. Hasn't spoke the whole time. He said aliens and okay technical difficulties.
So yeah, but I'd actually like to start to transition the debate back into what is existence and the meaning of life here. I'd like to start it off with kind of a story. Are you familiar with Sisyphus? It's the
big rock guy.
the big
Yes,
rock
the
guy.
big rock
So
guy.
long story short, this guy Sisyphus pissed off Zeus, and if you know anything about
Hades.
if you know anything about Greek mythology, you don't piss off Zeus.
I think you're right, actually.
So Zeus is like, hey man,
Fact check.
what you're gonna do here is I'm gonna have you roll this rock, roll this big boulder.
No, it was Hades. I'm not kidding. Because he
Okay.
escaped the underworld.
Okay,
to,
some sort of
'cause
Greek
his
god.
wife killed him or something, and then he escaped the underworld and he saw all the
Is
know
it relevant
sun
to
and
the
all that
topic?
stuff.
This
and
is irrelevant to the topic.
it
Just
is
let me
it
get
is
my-
relevant because then he was like, I want to stay in this life, and then Hades like dragged him down the underworld and he was like, push this rock up the hill and
So you know.
Anyways.
Yeah, I said long story short for a reason here, but so he's condemned to roll a rock, a big ass boulder up a mountain, for the rest of his life. But so when he gets up there at the end of the day, he has to roll it back down, and then he gets those 2-3 minutes of peace just walking back down the mountain to start it again at the next day. But I think that can be translated well into our life, our everyday life. Obviously, we don't roll a rock up a mountain, but
Maybe you don't.
we're maybe you could. I bad on me for making an assumption here, but instead of our boulder, assuming you're not doing that, school is kind of like our boulder because we have to go here every day. We have to roll it up.
schools are boulder, man.
I think what you're trying to say is just the daily routine that we have.
Yeah, but
the
the entire time,
cumulative,
but
efforts
you see
of
the
life.
So-
The
kinda-
thing with Sisyphus is, although he was condemned, he was still able to like deceive the gods because he still had his mind. He could still think about whatever he wanted to when he was rolling the rock up the mountain.
find some
and when
appreciation of what he was doing.
And those 2-3 minutes of peace he has walking back down, those is what he's able to, be himself. He can defy what society has brought upon him, and I think that could be, translated well over to our life. And
Definitely.
Sure.
and if you're trying to think of like a counterexample, like it might not be school. You could have work. You could have, African drug cartels. You could be in ISIS. It's whatever your thing is.
I think it works better as an analogy for just life as an accumulation of all our actions,
Yeah.
and just the futility of what he's doing versus, the futility of all of our, struggles and all of our hopes and aspirations and fears coming to an end with death, and that could be viewed as, futile and meaningless in the end, but that's not how I view it at all. I kind of think of it as, you get to be here in the present moment and experience what you're experiencing, and, you can find whatever meaning in that you can.
Yeah. And who knows what happens to our conscious, like when we pass.
Yeah, do you want to transition to consciousness? Because there's a lot to say about that.
Yes, there is. It's a pretty big topic.
So basically, before human history, when Africa was still a jungle, when the North and South America didn't merge yet, and the currents were all different, and there was still like this lush rainforest of Africa.
Were they blessed though?
By the rains?
By the rains?
I don't think that was around yet. few millennia before that. So basically, all the monkeys and apes were in tribes in the trees, and the theory is that humans were actually kicked out of the trees, and had to learn how to work
humans.
as a group. Because I saw this video about how apes actually have insane.
Can we fact check this video? What's the
It
title?
was on Vsauce.
Vsauce? Okay, that works.
We are going to have to
It's
check
Vsauce.
Yeah,
all
of
the
course.
stuff out there. We have no service right now in this room, so we can't.
MLA citation, 12-point font.
Yeah.
No, it's basically how
Double
apes
space.
have insane short-term memories. So they can look at a picture, flash up on the screen for half a second, and replicate all of exactly what it is. And so the theory is that we sacrifice that skill for language. And so the theory by many theorists and philosophers is that when humans were on the ground and had to learn how to hunt in tribes and fight off tigers and whatnot, they had to develop close-knit groups and language skills in order to triumph over that.
Yeah. They had to
And so-
communicate in some way.
Yeah. So and when they would follow like herds of cattle, and in the like shit of the cattle, psychedelic mushrooms would grow like psilocybin. And so the theory is that by taking these mushrooms, because at low doses they increase your visual acuity, so that's an evolutionary advantage. At higher doses, then you get like really horny, and they would have these massive orgies. And because of the massive orgies, there was no concept of children. It was just descendants of the tribe, and you would
Like in the
collectively.
hippies in the 60s.
The
Mr.
school
Hewitt
might not
goes off
release
about
this.
It's not a school podcast.
Mr.
So
Hewitt
they
talks
would
about this all the
collectively-
time. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so they collectively have children. So there wasn't any need for the concept of ownership, because they were hunting gathering society. So they didn't have agriculture. So it was collectively community oriented. And at higher doses of mushrooms, then you can't do anything really. You just sit there and just close your eyes and just transport yourself to another dimension. And so the theory is that that doubled our brain size, because there's a period of about 100,000 years in which the human brain, or the ape brain, the hominid, doubled in size, and evolution cannot account for it. Like there's hardly any theories except for the changes in the climate that can account for the doubling in brain size, and is considered one of the largest changes in a major organ of any animal in evolutionary history. So this theory that is produced by the human brain can't even account for it itself. And so I that's one theory about how consciousness came to be. As to what it actually is and how it's produced, there's many theories about it. It could be that the brain generates consciousness, and that the collective pathways and all the perceptions result in consciousness, and it's just produced in the brain, and when the brain dies, and it goes with it. There's also another theory that kind of relates it to a television set. When if a television set dies, it receives a signal when it's on, and when it dies, the signal is still there. It doesn't go with it. So that could be viewed the human brain could be viewed as the receptor of consciousness instead of generating it.
Now you're relating consciousness strictly to humans, but don't animals have consciousness too? Because like we can tell when animals have emotions, like when they're happy, when they're sad, or when they're hurt. How would you relate the two?
Well, I think there are many, many different levels of consciousness. And like, whales have the biggest brains of any animal, but they just have no way of expressing what they're actually experiencing, so they could be having these complex thoughts, and without, any means in which to...
They do have a language.
They have a language.
We know that.
Yeah, that's based in...
Just like that, yeah.
They have a language that's like based in genetics, and it's
Okay.
and it's encoded in their genes. Whereas with humans, it's an epigenetic phenomenon. So it's
Do we
what
know that for
produce.
sure? That
With humans,
no, that whales that it's encoded in their genes.
I
How do we
mean,
know there's not like whale
localized.
accents?
Yeah,
Like how do we know?
there could
Yeah,
be.
wait, what even causes accents, though? You ever thought about that?
Or languages in general. I mean, you
causes
split.
different languages to
Well,
develop,
language is... All sound is just vibrations. So how does it, like...
I mean, when you think about it, languages, separated at least by like continents or even country, I should say. They're all I mean, they have different words that have the same general meaning, but I mean, we assign meaning to words, but like
to nonsense small mouth noises.
Yeah,
Like,
literally. But I mean, when you think about it, like we had to communicate with other humans, we had to decode what they were saying, and I don't know if you put a whale on one side of in one ocean and put it in a completely different ocean, can it still communicate with the whales there?
I'm pretty sure because they migrate so much and it's such a communal type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's not like...
But, I mean, it's not like humans don't move a lot. I mean, the reason that...
But also whales can speak when almost as soon as they're born.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the whale
That's
language is more instinctive, and
Yeah.
it's less like it hasn't developed in different regions or based on a specific system in the same way.
If you raised a baby in a controlled environment with like no outside factors, no parents from which to derive an accent, how would they speak?
That's kind of like deaf people are kind of the same way. If they aren't able to interpret what they're saying, then they just have no way to communicate what's inside their head. So that could be viewed kind of
they have
the same
visual.
But if they're not, I mean that's a big problem too, especially in areas where people don't have education.
Yeah.
There's like not access to sign language classes and things like that. It can be difficult if like the child's raised without like that early sign language.
Yeah.
Time.
And I mean, I remember reading something about this blind kid, and he was trying to explain how he like saw. Like people were asking, "Do you just see black? What do you see? Like, can you just not see anything?" And the way he described it was like trying to see out of the back of your head. And that's a really weird concept for everyone that can see, because we can't really imagine that, because. I mean, I guess when you don't have eyes that let you to see in the front, you also don't have eyes that let you to see in the back, and so it's a very weird concept, because we can't just close our eyes and imagine, because now we're seeing black, which is not what he described, and whether he even knows what that is, black, because he's been blind his whole life, or at least as we know it. So I mean, there's just stuff that we don't even understand about the consciousness that. Even within humans, before we even go to animals. And
what do people who have gone blind since like an injury in their 20s or 30s, what have they said about being blind?
I don't know, to be honest. Okay. I would have to read up on that.
So do you know, do blind people dream? Do they have like the same kind of thinking that we have, where we can create images within our minds? Because like, if they've never seen anything, how would they be able to see anything?
That's an interesting question.
I mean, so what are the senses they have left? They have smell, they have feel, they have taste.
Yeah. So, which is all they can probably very much more developed because of the lack of vision.
And so, exactly. So, it's definitely stronger for people like with missing senses. But like, I imagine if they feel something, they have to be able to create some kind of mental image. It might not be a mental image that we think of. Maybe not like a picture, but some kind of structure in their mind.
Yeah, some kind of perception of the world.
Yeah, that's different than ours. It's very weird to think about, but...
And so much of what we learn is just based on... Of how we perceive the world is just based on what we learn as a child, kind of. And without, a very large part of that, not like vision or hearing, then it's a large part of that's gone. So it's weird to think about how... they just lost that entire part of how you were raised and that kind of filter that you see the world with.
And that goes for religion as well. So many of people who are religious are indoctrinated from youth.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think I'm sure you gain a different perspective from either, like, not having those senses or being raised in a different way. It's not necessarily like, certainly. I don't want to make it sound like you've lost something. It's sort of just like... different perspective. I mean, not that we remember, but when we were babies, like before we really like knew language to express ourselves, like we still had consciousness and we still had like needs and like knew how to communicate with our parents, but it wasn't the same
at that point.
But it wasn't the same sort of consciousness that we think of having now. It was based on images and not language in the same way.
Yeah, and it is a really basic communication, because it was basically when we were babies. It's when we want something. We made the same sound, whether we wanted to sleep, whether we wanted to eat. We made the same sound. We cried, and I mean that's a really basic form. But if we think of it like that for animals just maybe a little bit past that. Like they have the same sound when they want something, maybe the same sound when they're going to do something, just stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think-
precognition is really interesting. Like the entire development of the brain and everything. Like when consciousness actually comes into place, is there a certain point, like whence cometh this thing in which we see the entire world?
Yeah.
And it's kind of nothingness before and nothingness after death. This life is just kind of this window that that consciousness either inhabits the body or is produced by the body.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to what we were saying earlier about death, just kind of like, does our conscious continue?
Yeah.
When you think about it, try to think of what your conscious was like before you were born.
Yeah, that's kind of the same.
You can't imagine it, and it's scary to think that if that exists and that happens like the same way when you die, it's not like you can be sad about it. You just don't think, you don't exist. You just
So how does that
gone.
relate to the idea of reincarnation? Because if you're reincarnated, would you retain your former conscience, or would it all be like erased from your memory?
I think it's usually race. That's usually the view.
Yeah.
Well, we should first think. Are you thinking of consciousness as in a physical part of you, or as in like a non-physical entity that?
I would
can't
say
imagine.
non-physical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not,
kind of
definitely
how-
not physical.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting because I have thought like, is death like the same as before we were born? Because obviously we don't have memory of like, or even like when we were babies or like in the womb, like you don't have a memory of what that was like. But I mean, even like as a newborn, you have consciousness and you are like the same person as you grow up to be.
Yeah.
It's the same consciousness, like it's the same brain.
Same perception.
But you don't have memories of it, so it's so strange because I just have no idea like what that was even like, even though I went through it. I don't know.
And your brain on that topic is not developed though at that time, right? And so as it's developing, you finally can perceive more and memorize and all this other stuff. And I think that's the big difference between before like being born and after death, is that before you're born, your brain doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
It's still being formed inside the womb. And after death, your brain is still around. Like it still can exist. And I wonder if it's almost like that thing, like I used to say, you guillotine someone, right? Your head's off, but you can still talk for like 5 seconds before you're like completely gone or whatever.
That doesn't sound right.
I think it's you retain consciousness.
Or not talk, but like
You can move your mouth
'cause
and
you
stuff.
you can
still-
move your mouth.
Your vocal
Yeah.
cords wouldn't be able to
Yeah,
operate.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the wrong example. But but yeah, you still have like at least muscles in your face that you can use, and I mean there are still a few things that you can do, and I guess that kind of in a way shows that you do have consciousness. Like it continues.
Yeah.
Now, what about animals? Because I know chickens can go around running after their head's been cut off, or say a cockroach can go on for like 2 days.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's more just the signal from the brain before it was cut off is continuing.
Yeah. It's just like neurons firing. Pretty
Yeah.
Much. Like,
Okay.
But like, yeah, if you think about the animal kingdom again, you go to like shock or whatever, like animals will be eaten alive and they just sit there, and because I mean they've accepted their fate, but they're in a state of shock where they almost have like no pain at all.
Yeah.
And that's also really weird to think about, because they're conscious, but their body's telling them like this isn't happening, kind of thing.
That happens
Humans
to-
experience that
I
as
was
well.
gonna say, that happens to humans, too.
Yeah, that can happen to humans. It's more relevant in the animal kingdom because it happens more. But
Yeah. And can't humans actually die from, or it could be like really serious like injury if you actually do go into shock and like your body
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
have the proper responses, and
for sure,
I don't know. Interesting.
What are your guys' earliest memories?
earliest memories.
Like the first thing you remember?
So
Honestly, it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. But you can go first, yeah. Chris.
for me, I didn't realize this was such an early memory. So I talked to my grandmother. I thought I was like 5, but I remember going to the store and buying like a toy knight. I also have this memory of like a beachhead in a train video, And apparently all 3 of those memories are from this one trip I took to Charleston, South Carolina. Or it was actually Hilton Head, South Carolina, but I was probably about 9 months old at the time.
Whoa.
And that's probably my earliest memory. But, I mean, it's all so foggy back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also don't know how many memories I've sort of invented based on stories my family's
Exactly.
told me.
Yeah.
And that's because that's my problem. Is my first memory is of me doing this little dance and with this backward hat on, going yo yo yo, because I thought it was so cool, and I was 4 years old. But then I saw a video of it,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, did I remember this, or had I seen this video and I remembered the video? Because I think I saw the video as a home video just like a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, so that's not my first memory. That was just a video. And then when I try to go back and think about my first memory, I can't remember.
Memory is often portrayed as like this, pure, untouchable thing, but it's so malleable. It's so, apt to change.
Yeah, and they found out with all sorts of studies about eyewitnesses
Yeah,
and like
exactly.
how credible that is. But I mean, I think the first thing I know I actually remember and like wasn't just a story is when I don't even know how old I was. I couldn't speak very well. Maybe I was like 1 or 2 maybe, but I got like swollen lymph nodes and was in a lot of pain, had to go to the hospital, and that's like the first thing I remember. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
So your
It's
first
interesting.
memory is almost traumatic.
I mean,
lot of
it
times
all
it
turned
is.
out
It
okay.
is.
It wasn't that serious,
Yeah.
but I mean, maybe that's why it like stuck with me.
Because it's that impactful, a lot of times it'll stay. It'll,
I actually cracked my head open on a fireplace because I was a genius as a kid, but I have no memory of it.
Well,
So I guess in
maybe
comparison,
because you hit your head in the fireplace.
yeah, that could happen too. Yeah.
My earliest memory is I was probably 2 or 3, and I was at an aquarium in New Jersey, I think it was. It was like at my uncle's house, my grandpa's brother, so like my great uncle. And I was like looking at all these jellyfish just swimming, up this tank. So that's kind of a cool memory, I think.
Yeah, that's a good memory to have. At least it's
Yeah.
not traumatic.
Yeah.
What about you, Blaise? You don't have
Honestly, can't tell you. I'm trying to think of thinking back to like preschool, but I just can't. Nothing comes to mind.
any? I know. I can
Like,
think
wait,
of
actually-
kindergarten.
Actually, so it's very foggy, but I can remember we had like a beach day in preschool, and there was a bunch of like goldfish, and then we had like a van set up. It was like a bunch of chairs that were just arranged, so it's like you're in a bus. It's like we're taking a bus ride to the beach, but that's like that's all I can remember. It's like apparently I had all these like friends with like students or people that are still like in our class today, but it's like I have no memory of being their friend.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know if it's this way for you guys, but personally, when I'm trying to think back into my past like that, it's easier for me to see images rather than necessarily stories.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I
Yeah.
remember a couple images from like preschool, but I can't necessarily like say what it was all about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually when you mentioned the whole preschool thing, I was able to think back to kindergarten, and instead of thinking about specific events from kindergarten, I can imagine the whole building and the outside playground, and it feels like I can almost walk around
Yeah.
in my
Right.
memory, and I can see like the whole place, but I can't see any of the people or
Right. Yeah.
Faces aren't really remembered.
Yeah.
It's not detailed. It's just general feelings. It's smells. It's tastes.
E-
Temperature and all that stuff.
Even from more recent memories, I still feel like I just have very vague sort of impressions and like a few images or like specific like big events I remember, but I don't know. It's definitely not as clear. When it's happening, it seems like it's so detailed and
Yeah.
you have this
Yeah.
image of like what happened. But my brother was in. So the last time he lived with us, like we lived as a family, really wasn't when he was in high school, which was not that long ago. I mean, that was 7 years ago. And I still feel like I just have such vague sort of impressions of that, like, entire period. Like, I don't remember, like, specific times where, like, we would eat dinner together or, like, I would go to his events. I mean, I remember some of it, but it seems like so long ago, even though it really wasn't.
It's kind of interesting that parents sometimes spoiled their children. Like, oh, we're going to go to Disney World. I'm going to buy you all this stuff. When really, like, once you're like 10 or even like 15, you're gonna have like no memory of that experience. You might
Yeah.
have a sort of emotional connection to it, but you're not gonna remember that event. Like
It's not worth spending all your college
But-
savings
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, I mean, that goes back sort of what we were talking about at the beginning, that it's about like the experience in the moment.
Yeah.
And even if you're 3 years old and going to Disney World, you're gonna have a great time, even if you have absolutely zero memory of it happening later.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the memories, but more just sort of being in the moment and having that experience.
Yeah, and I have a memory of going to Disney World when I was 7, and what's funny is I don't remember a single thing that I enjoyed, but all I remember is how hot and humid it was, and the only thing I can remember from that trip when I was 7, or walking around Disney World, is that I wanted to buy one of those fans that also squirted mist in my face. And that's all I wanted. And that's all I could think about, and that's all I can remember. It's so weird.
It's interesting that you bring up Disney World, because that's like one of my earliest memories as well. I was like 5, but I have a couple like images that just stand out. Like I was terrified of this E.T. plush doll. I also remember I remember being like a little kid, which is kind of weird, like just because like I'm 6 foot now and I was like 3'6" earlier. But I remember
Absolutely.
staring up at Epcot, and it was like almost like a bluish blackish sky. And also, I want to say I fed a donkey. It's just a few like almost meaningless memories like that just stick out.
Yeah.
I think what's almost more impactful than having the memory itself is your overall development. You know, if you have positive experiences, then you're going to develop into, you know, a happy person usually. And it's just, you know, collectively all your experiences are going to add up to, you know, some kind of personality.
And on that, like I think just as a young human, having good social interactions at a young age is going to help you in your development.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, even though you don't have necessarily the memories of it, it does impact who you are as a person. So in that way, you carry all your experiences with you in a different way. It's not necessarily what we think of as remembering them or exactly knowing what they are, but in some way they shaped you, and so you do sort of always have them in that sense.
I mean, okay, this is kind of branching off from that, but going back to the whole just memorizing like people's faces and the like when you think back, I mean, we all know people that we're close with, we can think of, but when you try to just picture a face, like a full face,
when you try to draw it, like if you, I think
or not
drawing
even draw it. I mean, I mean, because I'm an awful artist, so I can't portray what I'm thinking of anyways. But even if you try to think of a full face in your head, even if it's someone you really know, it's hard to picture like the full face and not just think about.
Well, I feel like the exception to that is anyone that's been like some kind of infamous like dictator, totalitarian, where they have like their face implanted on posters and it's all over the place. Like, I feel like that's the exception, because I can imagine like Vladimir Lenin's bald head, and he's got the beard going on.
So this is actually.
But can you see it in one image?
In one image,
the whole face.
I think the only people I'm able to do it with is like my parents,
I say so.
because of how.
Yeah.
Wait, are you just saying like whether or not we can picture somebody's face?
Yeah, like a full face.
Try to picture a face.
Jeff Goldblum.
Well, and I don't know how accurate this is. I'll have to fact check this later. But I read or something somewhere that we can't actually draw new faces. Like humans aren't capable of like inventing like new faces in their head.
That's
like even if you
Whoa.
think like you've never seen something like that, you like an image that you're painting or creating, like it really is sort of resembling like.
That
I guess
other people
that makes
you've
sense
seen.
though, because like if you
no, go ahead.
well, if you look at like video games or like we'll go with video games. A lot of the time there'll be like characters that look like something, but it was never intended to be that. Like there was a lawsuit that Lindsay Lohan was like. There's a lawsuit with Lindsay Lohan a couple of years ago with the GTA 5 cover art, because she was like, hey, why'd you use a picture of me? But it wasn't intentionally supposed to be a picture of Lindsay Lohan. It was just supposed to be some chick.
I think
so,
also
it's interesting how that works.
Humans, supposedly we have 6 or 7 lookalikes in the world. Now there's 7 billion people at this given moment. That means there's 1 billion different faces out there. So there's almost an endless amount of combinations when you consider like facial structure and stuff like that.
I think that's so interesting, because when you think about how similar everybody's facial features really are, like we all have 2 eyes, I know it's like a mouth, like it's very similar shape, and yet there's so many different combinations, and like I feel like it's hard to imagine like how small differences like can change it so much, but like I've always been amazed at how many different like faces there can be.
Yeah. And also we're like social creatures, so we're built evolutionarily to recognize different faces. But if you think about it from a broader perspective, we all look pretty similar.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
there's not that much that's different about all of us. You know, no matter the race or anything, it's just we're built to recognize distinctions on all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what Chris said about the whole, there's only 6 or 7 like lookalikes. I mean, when you think about it, it is kind of limited. If you're judging based on like race, like the 4 of us are probably not going to find a lookalike that's like in North Africa or something. Like maybe a similar facial structure, but not like an exact lookalike. But if you're going like for a full doppelganger, I mean the space where you're looking is probably pretty limited.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I would imagine that there'd be fewer people who look like me just because there are like fewer mixed race people, but I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, I know what you mean, like it probably is sort of limited just based on like geographical movement.
That is actually an interesting idea, just because, especially nowadays, there are so many mixed races throughout history.
Yeah.
That's kind of the path of history. There's going to be, like, there's this theory about how eventually there's not going to be specific races where it's all just going to be like kind of a, you know, light
Conjoined.
brownish color.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, it's already kind of happening, and
Yeah.
it is sort of become like, what really does race even mean? I mean,
Yeah.
like I heard,
It's really nothing.
like, I mean, yeah, it's just our own like invention of different categories. But I
Yeah.
think I heard something like John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, their children are black, white, and Asian, and one of them kind of said, like, hey, at that point, what does race even mean to them? Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not this distinct category anymore.
It's also overlapped and mixed. It's hard to distinguish because, you know, we all come from the same place if you go far back enough.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, over the past 1,000 years, we just kind of developed specific traits based on where we live for long enough.
Do you think that had humans not been able to invent technology to travel across land and sea, that we would have diverged into different species?
Well, there used to be different, like, I forget what it was called. There's like Homo sapien,
Sapien.
Homo erectus,
Yeah.
Homo habilis, and all that.
But they were
Oh,
still
so-
able to mate.
Well, that's actually the distinction between species, is when
Yeah.
they're not able to mate.
Exactly.
But wasn't
So
that
do you
like a
think-
linear progression? It wasn't like those species existed at the same time.
No, it was all from
right?
one source and they branched off,
Oh,
kind of
really?
thing.
Okay.
And then, but they died off because we're Homo erectus, right?
Homo sapien.
Or Homo
Yeah, we're Homo
Homo.
sapiens.
Oh yeah. It's, well, I know one of them killed the other off.
Yeah,
because they weren't
I'm
smart
pretty sure the
enough.
Homo sapiens killed off the Homo erectus. But
Or Homo
don't
erectus,
fact
I thought
check.
you said.
No,
No,
we're
we're
Homo
Homo
sapiens.
sapiens.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, we're Homo sapiens.
Yeah. But that's the other thing is like
Isn't like
they
Homo
look different.
Homo or something? Because it's like the double thinking, something like that.
double thinking.
Yeah, I thought it was the double thinking.
Mhm. Yeah,
Something
there's.
like that.
I don't know.
Double thinking sapiens. Well, sapiens like sentient. Don't
Homo,
quote me on
Homo,
that.
Homo
but-
sapiens.
You're just Homo.
No, you sapien. So
So, should we maybe wrap up this first
Yes.
podcast?
Yeah.
I think
Pretty
it's-
productive first episode.
Third period is coming to a close.
Yeah,
Yes.
third period podcast is coming to a close.
I'd like to thank our sponsor, Blue Apron.
And Squarespace, building websites since
Yeah,
1913.
Use promo code third period to get 50% off your first website.
Yeah, so this is weekly or bi-weekly, what are you thinking?
That'll be up to decision later, I think.
Yeah.
We'll find out either next week.
Yeah, we still need to listen to how we sound on this first
Yeah,
podcast.
exactly.
So to the one person who listened to the whole thing, I love you. I'm buying you dinner, okay?
All right, this has been Third Period Podcast.